everyone, to After Hours, your Patreon accessible account to the Latino Book Podcast. I'm Mike Madrid. Gonna be flying solo with you today because my brother from another mother, Chuck Rocha, had some really important business to attend to, and that's probably just as well, because the issue that I want to talk about today has to deal with this political article that ran today, where I spoke with a reporter by the name of Braxton Booker, again, Politico, and the book was on people of color in the Republican Party. Probably something that I'm uniquely positioned to talk about, certainly not the only one, but one that has spent 30 years working not just with Latino voters, Latino Republicans, but African American, Asian Pacific Islanders, and even women organizations to kind of try to address some of the fundamental challenges that face Republicans. So we've been talking a lot about the Latino vote from a Democratic perspective, and that's probably as it should be, because objectively, Latinos are still voting 65-35, 60-40 with the Democratic Party. That's where most of the base comes from with Latino voters. But make no mistake about it, the Republican House Conference is diversifying. And I've mentioned that it's happening for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is just simple math. Demography dictates that in a lot of these seats, there are going to be a lot more age-eligible candidates to run for office. What do I mean by that? Well, as white people get older, and they are about 15 years older on average than the typical Latino, you are seeing people who, by simply the stage in life that they're in, don't have the interest of going to Washington, D.C. or holding public office. And as Latinos become older, and by older I mean middle age, they are looking more towards public service, not because they're Latino, but because they're of that age in their life cycle where people start to give back. And so we're going to see from here on out, from now through the rest of our lifetimes, a record number of Latino office holders at every level of government. And that is going to create some significant demographic challenges for both parties, but for the Republican Party specifically. Why is that? Because the GOP has made a concerted effort of focusing all of its electoral gains on increasing the turnout amongst non-college educated white voters. That's how Donald Trump won the Electoral College in 2016. It was a strategy they were trying to replicate in 2020. It is one that I personally have always opposed, because it leads to this nativist argument and actually this making America great again argument that excludes people of color particularly. But that doesn't mean that all Republicans or all people of color view the world that way. And as I mentioned, a record number of Black members of the House and Latino members of the House on the GOP conference have been sworn in, and they are going to have an impact on the GOP one way or the other. So I want to talk about the two different paths that people of color in the Republican Party take. The first, and this is the most common and stereotypical, is these are the folks that kind of lean into what I call the minstrelization of our ethnicity or our race. They essentially play the foot soldier, the loyal foot soldier, for some of the worst elements of the Republican Party or for white identity politics, and basically become apologists. And the self-serving nature of a lot of these politicians allows them oftentimes to rise up in the ranks of the Republican Party. At least they have over the past 30 or 40 years. What I'll say about this is this. What I will say about that is this. There is a very strong ceiling that people hit very quickly when they do that, because they're not taken credibly, they're not taken seriously, and they're not acting with a whole lot of integrity. The slower path to power, but the better path to power, is one that is more genuine, where you're trying to reconcile truly, genuinely, sincerely held beliefs on your conservative ideas, smaller government values, and your philosophy about the role of government with your ethnicity and your racial background. Because we are a country where our tribal politics have made it such that there's a very direct correlation between your minority status and the party that you vote for, or your non-minority status and the party that you vote for. You become a minority as a Republican with your racial and ethnicity in the Republican Party, but you are also a minority in your own community. In my case, my Latino community, by my beliefs. And so you're a minority in both parts of yourself. It's an exhausting place to be. But I also think in many ways it's the right place to be. I mean, clearly it's what I've been doing for the past 30 years. The goal has always been for me, and I think for most of the minority Republicans that I've met, is to try to be a bridge towards a philosophy that works for us, that navigates, that we believe helps us navigate through life and aspirationally lifts up people economically to find empowerment, to work against the excesses of government that too often have not benefited our communities, and to be that voice to say, if we look at things differently as a community, if we view freedom and opportunity in a more open and pervasive way, perhaps we can get out of the multi-decade cycle that has limited our opportunities economically, that has created intergenerational or multi-generational poverty. That maybe there's a reason why the policies that we adopt that affect our public school system disproportionately hurt children of color. That there are other reasons beyond systemic racism, which clearly exist, that economically can allow us to climb out of this intergenerational, multi-generational poverty that I just talked about. Other groups, other ethnic and racial groups have done it, and they are doing it. And at some point, there has to be some reckoning about our ability to at least look and examine some of those options as a way to raise the discourse and broaden the policy discussions beyond Democrat and Republican. Part of the success of this program, of Chuck Rocha and my program, is even though we disagree on virtually every policy, we believe in each other's commitment to the community. And that allows me to give Chuck the benefit of the doubt. Even now, when I see Democrats in power, I'm not terribly comfortable with it because I think I can predict with a high degree of certainty what that's going to mean for my community, and it doesn't look good. That's the story of California. But that doesn't mean that Chuck is a bad guy. It doesn't mean that Democrats are bad people. It simply means we have a difference of opinion. And that multivariability, that flexibility, that cultural superpower, I call it for Latinos, which is to look at both sides because we're not comfortable in either world. We're neither wholly a minority, nor are we wholly white, but we understand and can walk in both of those shoes. That's what allows us to understand where the Democrats are coming from and maybe look at the Republicans and say, you know what, that might not be that bad of a policy idea, and vice versa. In terms of a race or an ethnic group, Latinos are uniquely positioned to help navigate those waters. And I'm going to end that on this. That is the promise of the continuance of the American experiment, of the American idea, at a time when we are completely polarized, when we're completely locked down between Republicans and Democrats, when there is no middle anymore. The fastest growing segment of the electorate, the fastest growing segment of the American population are Hispanics, and Hispanics by definition are a mixed race people, a people that have a foot in two worlds. And if we can bring that cultural understanding, if we can bring that political perspective to a deeply divided nation and to a deeply partisan political structure, that might be the best hope for making democracy actually work again. Maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe I'm too Pollyannish. Maybe I need Chuck to rein me in here a little bit on that. But that's the promise. That's the hope. It's what I'm holding on to. Thank you for giving me the time, the opportunity, and the platform to share some of these ideas with you. Send us some of your comments on this topic or any others. We want to know what you think. Thanks for joining me on After Hours. We'll talk to you next week.